Howdy, folks. Welcome back to Biology 5. Today we're going to be entering week 13 and discussing the cardiac as well as the lymphic systems. So we are going to have exams this week. We're going to have our lab assessment as well as our lecture assessment. Both of those were built on coursework since the last exam, but before the content for this week. So it'll be like immune function and blood typing and how blood work and the composition of blood, as well as like the sensory and the neurological stuff. Alrighty, with that, I think we can go straight into the presentation for this week. Ready? Okay. So we are going to be looking at chapter 12, which covers the cardiovascular and the lymphatic systems. Now we're going to be looking at the cardiovascular system, blood vessels, the heart, blood pressure, as well as the lymphatic system itself. Now, the cardiovascular system is composed of blood vessels and the heart. Its function is to distribute blood, circulate oxygen and nutrients, and also remove waste. So structures that are coming away from the heart that are going to be receiving structures that are coming away from the heart that are going to be receiving flow from the heart are going to be known as arteries. Structures that return blood from the rest of the body to the heart are going to be known as veins. Here are some of the more significant venous systems that are within our body and what tissues they primarily deliver blood to. So blood leaves the heart through arteries, arterioles, capillaries, venules, and veins, and blood returns to the heart from the venules and veins. So you can kind of see how this sort of cycles through. So heart, artery, arteriole, capillary beds, then the capillary beds will start draining into the venules, the veins, and then from there back to the heart. Capillary bed is just all those tiny, tiny veins that are embedded in like your nail beds and the base of your kidneys and the surface of your skin. Or sorry, all those tiny arteries, capillaries. Blah. Lot of wrong words today. All right. Now, a couple common features that all blood vessels have in common. They have a space called a lumen, which is the hollow interior through which the blood is going to be flowing. They have an endothelium, an inner lining that's going to go and consist of simple squamous epithelial tissue. And each type of blood vessel has different traits in addition to these two common traits that are going to go and be reflecting its particular function. So all of them are going to be the basic plan of hollow tube lined with simple squamous epithelial tissue, but each of them has different twists to go and better suit whatever function they're trying to fill. Here are a few different examples. So here you can go and see a standard vein, inner layer of the endothelium, then there's a layer of smooth muscle and elastin, and then an outer layer of connective tissue that's going to anchor it to the other structures that it's going to be present near. Then a venule. Venules tend to have little valves because they're at a lower pressure since they're starting to return to the heart. They need to go and have structures to go and ensure that there isn't a backflow of fluid, hence these valves. An arteriole is going to go and have a layer of smooth muscle and a layer of endothelium, but it is not going to be surrounded by a layer of connective tissue. Same thing's going to go for a capillary. The endothelium of a capillary is only going to be one cell thick. This is going to go and be aiding in a gas exchange between the surrounding tissues. Now the artery up here is going to have a inner layer of endothelium, then a middle layer of smooth muscle and elastin, and an outer layer of connective tissue. You'll notice an artery is a lot thicker than a vein. This is just a mechanical engineering issue. Our artery needs to be thicker because it's going to be under higher pressure than our veins. Now, arteries, thick-walled muscular vessels, carrying blood away from the heart to the body / lung tissues, and they're going to be receiving higher pressure. That's why they have the thicker walls. The inner layer of an artery, the endothelium, is going to be the one in contact with the blood itself. And then the middle layer is going to include elastin and smooth muscle in order to allow for both stretching and contraction as needed. This is in part how we're going to go and be controlling our blood pressure is through dilation, vasodilation or vasorelaxation of our arterial systems. Now the outer connective tissue, again, is going to go and help hold the artery and attach structures in place so that they aren't damaged or twisted through the acts of movement. Now, the aorta, which is the body's main artery, is going to go and be at the top of the heart. A pulse is a pressure wave that's going to be created by alternate expansion and contraction of the arteries. This is going to go and move along the arteries with each beat. So whenever you're taking a pulse, you're going to hear a lub and then you're going to hear a dub. So the lub is your heart contracting and the dub is fluid flowing back into your heart as it expands again. Your pulse rate is a synonym for heart rate. Those two are going to be matched. They are referring to the same phenomenon. Now, I mentioned how your arterial system is going to go and help you control your blood pressure. And I mentioned vasoconstriction as well as vasodilation. So vasoconstriction is going to be contractions of the smooth muscle, which is going to go and narrow the lumen and reduce blood flow through an area. Vasodilation is going to be relaxation of that smooth muscle layer, which will in turn increase the lumen, and that is going to encourage and increase blood flow. A couple common diseases of the arteries. An aneurysm is when an artery wall is weakened and then the wall swells outward. If this bursts, the individual is going to go and have some very severe internal bleeding. It also can form life-threatening clots, which in turn can, cause strokes and other issues that are associated with clotting when you don't want clotting. This can be corrected surgically in some cases. Aneurysms can occur anywhere in the body where you're going to have an arterial system. People tend to specify like cardiac aneurysm or brain aneurysm. The tissue that it occurs in is going to be the defining factor in the naming of the particular aneurysm disorder. Now, arterioles are going to be the smallest diameter artery, and these are going to be the main controllers of blood pressure through vasodilation and vasorestriction. Blood pressure is the force of a force of blood against the vessel walls. And this is going to be the main pressure regulator before we dump into the finest type of blood vessel, the capillary networks. This is going to respond to hormonal and nervous and local condition controls, like you vasoconstrict when you're cold, you vasodilate when you're hot. When you're nervous, you vasodilate when you're cold. Like there are a lot of different mechanisms that can go and control the dilation of your arterioles, and they're going to go and be the main indicators of your blood pressure. Now, the capillaries, these are the microscopic blood vessels that are going to connect arterioles and venules, and they're going to be the site of gas exchange between blood and the body cells. The walls are only a cell thick, and so this is going to go and provide a very large surface area for gas exchange, as well as the exchange of nutrients and fluids. So everything exchange, really. Now, exchange occurs through endothelial cells across the plasma membranes and through slits between those cells. Blood flows very slowly, which is in turn going to allow more time for exchange of materials. This is in part why, like, if you get a paper cut, it seeps, it does not squirt alongside with like your pulse or whatever. Blood flows pretty slowly through capillaries because they're going to be the side of the lowest pressure in the body as well, just based off of volume compared to arterial volume. Now, capillary beds are going to be networks of capillaries that are going to service a particular area of the body. And that's going to be regulated by a precapillary sphincter, which is going to regulate the flow of blood into the bed. A sphincter is going to go and be any sort of ring of tissue in the body that can contract or open at will. Now, this is kind of just showing you how that works. So here is a capillary bed. Here's a giant red blood cell, erythrocyte, traveling through the capillary. And as it's going through, it's going to be exchanging materials with the outside world, with the other cells of the body. And capillaries are literally so narrow that blood cells have to go in single file to make it through them. Here is showing a capillary bed that's linking an arteriole with a venule. And here are the precapillary sphincters, which are going to go and be derived from the arterial side and are in turn going to control the rate of flow to the venous system. So like here, many of the sphincters contracted to go and narrow the flow through this capillary bed, which is going to increase the blood pressure in this region of the bed and reduce it in these regions. And this is just kind of showing the magnitude of blood flow throughout the body. So here we're starting in our arterial system. Then we can go and see where it's going to go and combine with the venous system, and then gradually get redirect. Basically, as we flow towards a capillary bed, we're going to lose blood pressure because all the liquid that can fit into this tube here, it can now spread all throughout all these tubes. And the further away we get from a capillary bed, as we are concentrating up towards the vena cava, our blood pressure is in turn going to start increasing again. Now, venules, capillaries merge to form venules, which are the smallest kind of vein, and venules then join to form larger veins. Veins carry blood back to the heart, and they have the same 3 layers as arteries. However, they are thinner layers. They have larger lumens, and they also are going to serve as our reservoirs for blood volume. So we have a little bit more blood than we need to account for potential loss. This is where that blood's going to be stored. Oops. Now, mechanisms for blood flow towards the heart. You must move blood against gravity from the lower parts of the body to the heart. So in order to aid with that, we have valves to prevent the backflow of blood through our circulatory system. This also takes some of the stress off of our hearts. A lot of these valves can also go and be regulated through contraction of skeletal muscles. So circulation is in part being managed by the muscles in our legs, as well as like our stomachs. This is one of the reasons why if you are starting to go and feel faint, you can slightly bend your knees and flex the muscles of your legs, and that's going to start increasing the blood pressure towards your upper body. Now, pressure differences caused by breathing. So the thoracic cavity during an inhalation is going to go and be pulling blood towards the halt because it's going to be lowering pressure inside of the lungs. When you exhale, wait. This is in turn going to go and put increased pressure on the abdominal cavity, which is the cavity underneath your lungs, like where your intestines are, which in turn is going to go and squeeze the veins and start moving blood towards the heart. So the action of our respiration is supportive of our circulatory system. Our limbs are going to go and be influenced by our respiration, which in turn is going to go and influence the pressures on the veins within the body. And I say limbs, the non-cardiac systems are going to be influenced by respiration, which in turn is going to go and squeeze the veins, allowing circulation. So if we look here, this is kind of how that mechanism is going to be working. So the legs are, so here you can see the valves inside of each of the veins. And you notice how when muscles squeeze, this is going to go and be pushing blood through the open valve towards the heart because these are all one-way valves. So if you start pulsing your calf muscles, you basically are creating a second heart. Since all these are one-way valves, we can take advantage of a one-way pump. We can take advantage of a simple pump that just requires squeezing, in this case, our calves. Now, structures. There are 3 layers of the heart. There's the myocardium, which is the wall of the heart that's mostly formed out of cardiac muscular tissue. It's very similar to skeletal muscular tissue in that it's heavily striated. but it's going to go and be similar to smooth muscle, and that it's going to be completely autonomous. Then you have the endocardium, also known as endothelium, which is the thin lining of the cavity of the hearts. This is going to go and reduce resistance to blood flow throughout the heart. It's a very smooth surface, and it's more smooth than would be possible with the musculature. Finally, you have the pericardium, which is a thick fibrous sac that holds the heart in position and also helps protect it from structures around it. So this keeps your heart from getting sores, from getting rubbed on, and things like that. Uh, in the middle of the heart, there is a separation between the two chambers that a mammal has, and this is going to be known as the septum. So each half is going to be subdivided again into two chambers for a total of four. We have a four-chambered heart. So the smaller chamber that's going to be thinner walled is called an atrium, while the larger chamber that's going to go and be more muscular is going to be called the ventricle. In addition to this, we also have two pairs of valves. We have the atrioventricular valves, which separate the atria from the ventricles, and this is going to be chamber to chamber. And then there's going to be semilunar valves, which separate ventricles from the exits. So blood is going to flow first to the atrium, and then to the ventricles, and then from there it's going to exit the body. Now, getting back to that lub dub that I mentioned earlier. So your heart is going to make a noise like lub dub. The lub is going to be the closing of the AV valves, and the dub is going to be the closing of the semilunar valves. So your pulse is going to match your heart rate, but if I were to listen at your chest to try to go and listen to your heart rate, the actual noises that I'm hearing are the noises of the valves closing and shutting. So here are the structures of the heart. Here you can see the septum in the middle, the double chambers. Here's going to be our atrial reception chambers. So these are, left atrium, right atrium, superior venous cava, pulmonary veins, aorta. Right. Then we have the AV valves, which are going to go and include the tricuspid valve, which is on the right side of the heart and has three flaps, as well as the bicuspid valve, which is going to be on the left side of the heart and has two flaps. Both of them are anchored in place by structures called chordae tendineae, which you can see here. These little fibers. Now, the semilunar valves are going to prevent the backflow of blood into the ventricles of the heart. The pulmonary semilunar valve is going to be between the right ventricle and the pulmonary artery, and the aortic semilunar valve is going to become between the left ventricle and the aorta. Here you can go and see those structures. The atrioventricle valve located between each atrium and the aorta, and the semilunar valve. Right. So we have two circuits of blood flow that we really need to go and be aware of, and that's going to be the pulmonary circuit, which is managed by the right side of the heart, and that's going to go and transport blood to the lungs that is low in oxygen, and then go and receive blood that's going to be rich in oxygen. So here's the pulmonary circuit. So we start in the right atrium. We pass through the AV tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. Then we pass through the pulmonary semilunar valve to the pulmonary trunk, from the pulmonary arteries to the lungs, from the lungs to the pulmonary veins, and then we are returned to the left atrium. Now, the second circuit is going to be the systemic circuit, which is going to be on the left side of the heart. And this is going to transport oxygen-rich blood to the body from the pulmonary system. And it's going to go and be receiving blood oxygen poor blood from the body. So the flow rate for the flow map for the systemic circuit is going to be left atrium to AV bicuspid valve, left ventricle, aortic semilunar valve, aorta, body tissues, inferior vena cava or superior vena cava, and then it's going to be returned to the right atrium from there. So here you can go and see the right and the left side are systemic and our pulmonary circuits. And you can go and see how those are going to go and be traveling. So leave the heart, get re-oxygenated at the lungs, return to the heart, then get pumped into the systemic circuit before returning to the pulmonary circuit. All right. So heart murmurs can be detected as swooshing sound when we listen to the at the chest. Any sound other than a lub dub, it's going to be resulting from turbulence or some sort of disturbance in blood flow. Now, this could mean a lot of things, anything from a clot to organ failure to genetic conditions that are not going to hurt you to injury. It's as a diagnostic tool, it just tells you that you need to look more. Now, discussing the okay. So the actual tissues of the heart itself are going to be taken care of by the coronary circulation system. These nourish the heart muscle and remove waste. So coronary arteries are going to be the first two arteries that branch off the aorta and branch extensively, and they're going to be bringing oxygen and nutrients to the heart muscle. This is important because the heart is going to be working harder than any other muscle in the body. It is not going to get a rest period. So it needs a very good supply to remove waste and bring nutrients. Now, coronary veins carry blood away from the heart. Blood passes through capillary beds of the heart, enters the coronary veins, then enters the coronary sinus before finally returning to the right atrium. So here's the cardiac system of the heart itself. As you can see, it's hypervascular. Again, this is tissue that's getting a lot of work done on it. It's having to work constantly. Now, cardiac cycle. All chambers are relaxed. Blood passes through the atria into the ventricles. The atria contracts. The ventricles contract, and while the atria relax, then the ventricles relax, letting the cycle begin again. So the contraction portion of the cycle is known as the systole, and the relaxation portion of the cycle is known as the diastole. Alrighty, so early diastole, atria and ventricles are relaxed and fill passively. Later diastole, ventricles are still relaxed and filling passively. Atrial systole, both atria contract and force blood into the ventricles, and then ventricle systole. Both ventricles contract. The right ventricle forces blood into the pulmonary trunk, and the left ventricle forces blood into the aorta. So this is the standard cycle for a heartbeat. Now, cardiac cells are going to go and include what are known as intercalcated discs, which are going to be connective membranes at certain junctions. Now, the intrinsic ability to contract, so these possess the intrinsic ability to contract independently inside and outside of the body. However, they always will go and beat in union as soon as they touch each other. So they're going to synchronize, but they still need to go and have some sort of outside input that's going to actually control the rate of contraction. So the individual cells can contract and circulate, but they do need something from the outside to go and tell them how fast to do it. And those things from the outside are known as nodes. So the first is going to be the sinoatrial or the SA node. This is the natural pacemaker. This is going to control your heart rate. If this is damaged, they can replace it with an electrical one, which is called a pacemaker. So this is going to be located in the right atrium. It's going to cause the atria to contract by generating an electric signal, and it's going to set the tempo of the heartbeat, and it's going to go and transmit impulses to the AV node. Now, the AV node, or the atrioventricular node, is going to be located between the two atria, receive the signal from the SA node, and transmit the signal through the atrioventricular bundle. Now, the atrioventricular bundle is going to be located along the walls between the two ventricles, and it's going to transmit to Purkinje fibers. So Purkinje fibers are going to go and penetrate the walls of the ventricles and cause the ventricles to contract. So here you can see we have the SA node. It sends a signal right over here, and also signals the AV node. AV node is going to go and send a signal along bundles of conducting muscle cells to the Purkinje fibers, which in turn are going to convey the electrical response to the rest of the cardiac tissue. Now, disorders of the internal conduction system. One is ventricular fibrillation, which is irregular contraction of the ventricles. This can lead. This is one of the early. This is one of the visible signs of a heart attack. An electric shock can be used to reset the SA node to a normal function. Occasionally, individuals will have a defibrillator planted in their chest that's going to go off in response to this. Whenever it happens, it's a very difficult disease to have. So let's go and have a look at how this works.
As mammals, humans have a four-chambered heart and two essentially separate circulatory loops. One is the pulmonary circulation, in which blood flows between the heart and the lungs. The other is the systemic circulation, in which blood circulates between the heart and the rest of the body. Blood that is loaded with oxygen is carried from the lungs to the left atrium, then to the left ventricle to be dispersed to the tissues of the body. Blood depleted of its oxygen is returned to the heart through the vena cava, and then to the right atrium and ventricle, where it's sent back to the lungs to be oxygenated again. The exchange of materials between the blood and tissues occurs in the smallest blood vessels of the body, the capillaries. In the pulmonary capillary bed, the deoxygenated blood cell loads oxygen and unloads carbon dioxide. In the systemic capillary bed, oxygen is delivered to the tissues, and carbon dioxide waste from the tissues enters the bloodstream. The vertebrate heart is a muscular pump that provides the force needed to circulate the blood. The human heart has four chambers, two atria, singular atrium, and two ventricles. The atria are thin-walled chambers of muscle that receive blood returning from the lungs and body, and the ventricles are thick-walled muscular chambers that generate the force to pump blood to the lungs and the rest of the tissues of the body. The right atrium receives oxygen-depleted blood through two veins called the inferior and superior venae cavae, singular vena cava. When the atria contract, blood in the right atrium is forced into the right ventricle. The right ventricle receives blood from the right atrium, and on contraction, sends this deoxygenated blood to the lungs. The left atrium receives oxygenated blood from the lungs through two veins called the pulmonary veins. The pulmonary veins are the only veins that carry oxygenated blood. When the atria contract, blood in the left atrium is forced into the left ventricle. The left ventricle has the thickest walls of the four chambers. It receives the oxygenated blood from the left atrium, and on contraction, sends it through the aorta to all the tissues of the body. The blood is prevented from flowing backward into the chambers by a system of flap-like valves. The four chambers of the heart alternate between contraction and relaxation in a concerted fashion. This pattern is called the cardiac cycle. A cardiac cycle consists of one complete diastole, the relaxation or expansion phase, and one complete systole, or contraction phase. At the start of diastole, the heart muscle is relaxed, and blood flows into the atria. Toward the end of diastole, both atria contract simultaneously, followed about a tenth of a second later by the ventricular contraction. Atrial contraction at the end of diastole helps to fill the ventricles with blood immediately prior to the systole, the phase of the cardiac cycle during which both ventricles contract simultaneously. Step by step, the cycle works like this. Diastole begins when the atria relax and blood flows into the heart. Veins that carry deoxygenated blood from the body fill the right atrium. The left atrium is filled by the pulmonary veins, which carry oxygenated blood from the lungs. The atria are now filled with blood, while the ventricles are still relaxed. Some blood flows passively from the atria to the ventricles at this time. The atria contract, forcing blood into the relaxed ventricles. After contraction, the atrial valves prevent the backflow of blood from the ventricles to the atria. Next, the atria relax and the ventricles contract. Deoxygenated blood is pumped out of the right ventricle into the pulmonary arteries and carried to the lungs, while oxygenated blood is pumped out of the left ventricle through the aorta to the rest of the body. Upon relaxation, the pulmonary and aortic semilunar valves prevent the backflow of blood from the exiting blood vessels to the ventricles. One cardiac cycle is completed in less than 1 second. Blood pressure varies according to the cardiac cycle. The diastolic blood pressure is the lowest pressure, occurring during ventricular relaxation. The systolic blood pressure is the peak pressure, which occurs during ventricular contraction. A stethoscope and sphygmomanometer are routinely used to measure diastolic and systolic pressure. The different sounds heard through the stethoscope, called Korotkov sounds, correspond to the contraction and relaxation of the heart. The cuff is first inflated, so that it compresses the brachial artery. The pressure in the cuff is slowly released, and as it descends, it reaches a point where blood is able to spurt through the constricted artery only at the moments of highest blood pressure. This pressure at which tapping sounds are first heard is the systolic pressure, the blood pressure when the heart is contracting. As the pressure in the cuff continues to drop, a point is reached where the sounds disappear. The blood is now flowing continuously through the brachial artery. The pressure in the cuff when the sounds first disappear is the diastolic pressure, the blood pressure when the heart is relaxing. Blood pressure is reported in fractional notation, with systolic pressure as the numerator and diastolic pressure as the denominator. For example, a normal blood pressure might be 120 over 80 millimeters of mercury.
Mercury is just a standard measurement for pressure. Inches of mercury is the default. You'll notice a lot of this was pioneered by weather stations originally and then was applied to other sciences as they developed in turn. Alrighty, so an electrocardiogram is going to be a recording of the electrical events associated with the heartbeat. An irregular heartbeat is one of the early indicators of many, many different health conditions. And so this could be a useful early diagnostic tool. Now, electrocardiogram, is going to go and be composed of 3 distinguishable deflection waves. First, you have a P wave, which is going to be receiving signals from the SA node. These are going to spread across the atria and cause them to contract, leading to atrial depolarization, working within the electrical terms that we established during our neural section. Then we have the QRS wave, which is going to be a spread of signals through the ventricles and ventricular contraction, which is going to in turn lead to ventricular depolarization. Finally, we have the T wave, which is a return of the ventricles to the electrical state before contraction, at which point the ventricles can start to repolarize. So showing this in terms of electrical potential, here is our P, our Q, our R peak, and our S trough, and then our T recovery. So QRS, spreading of signals through the ventricle and ventricular contraction. T, return to normal. P, start of signals from the SA node. Now, blood pressure. This is just the force exerted by the blood against the walls of the blood vessels, which can be measured using a sphygmomanometer. This is going to go and be measuring pressure in the brachial artery of the arm, and that's going to go and in turn be influenced by the person's life history as well as their health. Systolic pressure, as was stated in the video, is going to be the highest pressure in the artery during each heartbeat, and this is when your ventricles are contracting. Normally, that's going to be 110 to 120 in a healthy adult. Sometimes it's higher if you're a big guy, like even if you're just naturally like 6'1", 200 pounds, like healthy, you're going to have high blood pressure. People aren't meant to be bigger than like 5'10", which is stupid. And I say this as somebody who's 6'2". Now, diastolic pressure is going to be the lowest pressure in the artery during each heartbeat. These are when the ventricles are relaxing. The normal range for this is 70 to 80 in a healthy adult. Again, it tends to be higher in larger people and higher in people who are stressed out more often. So here's how someone is taking blood pressure using a blood pressure cuff. And again, they're going to be listening for the start of the thudding noise and the end of the thudding noise, and that's going to establish the systolic and diastolic range, which is going to be presented as a fraction. Now, the lymphic system, components of the lymphatic system are going to go include, believe it or not, lymph. Lymph is the same type of fluid that's lymph is going to be identical to interstitial fluid. And lymphatic vesicles are just going to go and be a series of one-way valves that are going to go and circulate lymph throughout the body. So the lymphic system returns excess interstitial fluid to the bloodstream. It helps prevent bloating. It also transports certain fat-soluble materials from the small intestine to the bloodstream. And it's going to defend the body against disease-causing organisms as well as abnormal cells. It's a very important immune organ. Now, disorders of the lymphic system. So, one of the more common ones is elephantitis. It's a result of parasitic infections. The parasites actually physically scarify and block the lymphatic vessels, which is going to prevent the return of fluid to the blood, which is in turn going to make that fluid accumulate in the tissues of the body. This results in large amounts of swelling, as well as darkening and thickening of the skin, and often accumulation of fat and calcified tissue in the region of affliction. So here's an example of someone with elephantitis in the legs. As you can see, it causes deformation and discoloration of the skin. This can be treated with surgical intervention, but the longer it's left, the more difficult it is because at the end of the day, you're trying to remove all the scar tissue, and this condition forms more scar tissue. Now, the lymphatic capillaries are going to be the point where microscopic tubules are being saturated with fluid from the tissue, which then are going to go and be returned to the system from there. So these guys are going to be different from blood capillaries because they have an ending. They don't circulate through. They just stick out terminally. They also are significantly more permeable. It's easier for things to get into the lymphic system than the circulatory system. And all those lymphic capillaries are in turn going to be draining into the lymphatic vessels. So lymph eventually enters a duct that joins with large veins at the base of the neck. So the lymph does eventually drain into the circulatory system. So here you can see those terminal ends. They're going to be anchored in place, and they're just going to be a place for interstitial fluid to drain. And they also are going to include these mini valves to make sure that flow is one way. Now, lymph nodes, bean-shaped structures that filter the lymph as it flows through them. They're going to be saturated with immune tissues like macrophages and lymphocytes, and that's going to be very important to our immune systems. So some lymphoid organs include the spleen, which is the largest lymphoid organ. This is going to go and be filtering the blood of microorganisms, and it's also going to be clearing up dead red blood cells and platelets. The spleen is also a site of blood synthesis as well. It's like a secondary source of bone marrow. Now, the thymus gland is going to go and play a role in maturation of lymphocytes in childhood. In addition, it's going to go and release a lot of hormones that are going to go and help regulate the lymphic system. The tonsils are a larger lymph node. This is going to go and help protect against diseases that are inhaled or swallowed. It's an important part of the immune function of our upper respiratory tract. And the disease of tonsillitis is going to be inflammation of the tonsils, usually because of an extreme immune event. Another example of lymphatic tissue is going to be the Peyer's patches, which are nodules that line the small intestine, as well as red bone marrow, where white blood cells and other cell elements are going to be formed and produced. So the marrow is considered part of the lymphic system as well. And here showing the different lymphatic node systems. As you can here are all our lymph nodes running through the body, the points where they concentrate. And again, this is all to filter the blood, capture interstitial fluid and reintroduce it to the circulatory system, and also help produce immune cells. All right, folks. So with that, you should be able to list the functions of the cardiovascular system. Should be able to compare the structures of arteries, veins, and capillaries, and explain how the structure facilitates the function of each type of vessel. You should be able to contrast the exchange of gas in the pulmonary and systemic circuits, and you should be able to describe the internal conduction system of the heart and the resulting cardiac cycle. In addition, you should be able to define blood pressure and differentiate between the systolic and diastolic blood pressure, as well as describe the function and structures of the lymphatic system. All right, folks. So that should cover all our materials. Everything's going to be posted on the Canvas par normal. Let me know if you run into any issues when you're working on the exams. In particular, if you run into a question that doesn't seem like it was pulled from our content or that you think is unfair or has any issue with it, please screenshot that question so I know where to look in order to go and correct any sort of issues that we're having with the problems. In addition, with that, I hope you all have a great day and I wish you well.